Hi students, this is our next lecture in the BSB 102 General Biology 2 online course, and today we start a new cycle of lectures, pretty short one, called Ecology. Ecology. This is our last topic in the semester. The semester is drawing to its close, so we have to hurry up a little bit, but uh, just don't worry. Listen and read carefully. You'll be fine. So what's ecology? Ecology. The word ecology is derived from the Greek word ekos, which means house or home. So it's the study of how organisms interact with their environment. In a way, how do organisms live in their natural homes, in their habitat, in their environment. Uh, as a separate branch of biological sciences, ecology was launched in the second half of the 19th century. A number of German authors published some papers and a book in 1869 arguing that simply studying organisms is not enough to understand life. We need to study their interaction with their environment. Uh, so the organisms must interact with both living and non-living things that surround them. Uh, Today, ecologists study the movement of materials and energy through living communities, rather complex cycles of carbon, oxygen, water, etc. And we will not go over that. There's a lot of chemistry there, and it's probably subject to a more advanced course. Uh, Interactions and adaptations in these communities, that we will touch on that. Biodiversity and its changes. And an important part of ecology is the study of how humans interact with their environment and how to make our life sustainable and friendly to our environment. In other words, one of the most important tasks of ecology is to uh, find ways of not harming the environment, not uh, decreasing the biodiversity, not creating endangered species, not to drive different forms of life to extinction by our human activities. Uh, Research in ecology is done at the various levels of organization. You see there what levels of organization you know atoms, molecules, cells, tissues, etc. The right part of this of this chart shows you these levels of organization from bottom to top. Cells, tissues, organs, organisms, populations, and then something that we did not discuss, a term that we're just introducing, communities, ecosystems, biomes, biosphere. And at the left part you see levels of organization shown as concentrating circles with pictures inside them giving you an idea what they are. The lowest level of organization which is subject to ecology is species. Then uh, number two, population. So population, so you remember, it's a group of organisms belonging to the same species, but also living in a certain area. Right? Uh, um, sunflowers that are blooming in Kansas are not the same population than sunflowers blooming in Ukraine. They belong to the same species, but they're different populations. Then next level, community. Community is a number of populations which interact with each other. And then ecosystem, you see a larger circle with some life forms, trees shown there, a bird, maybe a hawk or an eagle flying high. So ecosystem is a number of populations interacting with themselves and also with uh, factors like uh, atmosphere, water, soil, temperature, humidity, etc., the so-called abiotic factors. So so an ecosystem is actually a community interacting with what's outside of it, with non-living things, non-living parameters, or parameters of physical and chemical nature, not biological nature. The biome is a ecosystem in a particular part of the planet Earth. So it's an ecosystem that is adapted to a certain kind of environment, from extreme frost, cold, snow, ice, to temperate regions of Earth, to subtropical, tropical, equatorial regions, terrestrial, aquatic. So some biomes are terrestrial; they are adapted to living on the soil, and aquatic, living in the in water. And so, and the biosphere is the sum total of all biomes. So it's a huge number of ecosystems, each of which is interacting with particular forms of environment depending on where it is located. So the sum total makes up what was called biosphere. Biosphere is a global planetary thing. It's basically all living systems with their interactions on the scale of the entire planet Earth. So you see the scope of ecology is very broad. Uh, Now let us talk a little bit more about communities and ecosystems. So again, a community is a group or association of populations. Uh, Usually, a community includes populations of two or more species. So if there are two populations of the same species and they interact, it's not yet a community. A community implies that there is, for example, a population of lions and a population of gazelles, right? Or a population of trees and a population of giraffes. So populations, two or more species, different species, occupying the same geographical area and in particular time. So living in a certain place at a certain time. That's community, or also known as biosynosis. Uh, the primary focus of community ecology is on the interactions between populations. Then one layer higher, an ecosystem. An ecosystem can be defined as a community made up of living organisms and non-living components such as air, water, and mineral soil. So you see an example of a community on the left. It's a group of organisms of different species living in a particular area. So you see what is there? The lion killed zebra and a vultures, some bird of prey. Uh, they live in a particular area and they interact with each other. In this case, lions are hunting zebras, and these birds of prey are uh, preying on either dead or dying animals. Uh, an ecosystem, it's a biological community that occurs in some locale, and see the second paragraph on the right, uh, and the physical and chemical factors that make up its non-living or abiotic environment. So here you see an example of cacti growing in the desert, right? So they are interacting with each other, and they are interacting with the soil, which in the desert is a particular kind of dry sand sort. You see prairies where there are different grasses and animals like bisons. Again, they interact between themselves and with their abiotic environment. Uh, and it says there are many examples of ecosystems. A pond, and a pond is an ecosystem. It's a number of plants and animals which form populations, and the non-living or abiotic component, water, right? Then a forest, also populations of different trees, populations of animals living in it, populations of mosses and fungi, mushrooms, whatever, plus the environment, air mostly, right, and soil. An estuary, that's the place where a river joins a bigger body of water, a sea or a big lake. Uh, a very peculiar kind of ecosystem, which actually it presents a huge biodiversity, a grassland. So these are ecosystems. Now biomes. Biomes are ecosystems uh, characterized by interaction with a very peculiar environment, uh, which is dictated by the geographical location, actually the proximity to the poles, northern and southern, and proximity to the equator. Uh, Now, traditionally, the major uh, biomes are, first of all, biomes can be aquatic, right, part of this picture, and terrestrial. And terrestrial biomes are traditionally named after their climax vegetation. So it's, uh, what is the most abundant, most representative type of vegetation in these terrestrial biomes, beginning from the uh, poles and going down to the equator. Uh, Tundra, it's characterized, we'll take a closer look at it in the next slide. Then coniferous forest, temperate broadleaf forest, temperate grassland, chaparral, desert, savanna, tropical forest. And so these are terrestrial biomes from the pole to the equator. Uh, and aquatic biomes are characterized by the type of water where they are freshwater lakes, ponds, rivers, estuaries, wetlands, and marine or saltwater biomes in the ocean. Okay, let's just I want you to have a kind of a tour over the terrestrial biomes of the Earth, beginning from the proximity to the. Let's just limit ourselves to the northern hemisphere and look at terrestrial biomes from uh, the closest to the northern pole to those that are closest to the equator. Now the tundra is biome at the top of the world, around the North Pole, tundra. Uh, I'm sure you heard this name, tundra. Always in our minds, it is associated with something very cold and not very rich in terms of biodiversity, life forms. And that's only partially true because there is quite a biodiversity in the tundra, actually. It is the coldest of all the biomes. The temperatures in summer may reach something like 50, 55 Fahrenheit, and in winter they are way, way, way below freezing. Uh, it has permafrost. Permafrost is a permanently frozen layer of ground below a thin layer of tundra soil. So if you look at the ground in the tundra, first of all, it's almost always covered with snow, at least partially. In winter, it's completely covered with snow. In summer, it is mostly snow, but some areas of dry soil without snow. The soil is very thin. It's just um, inches, fractions of an inch sometimes. And below the soil there is a frozen ground. So basically ice, right? Permafrost. So this permafrost influences pretty negatively on the vegetation. You cannot find a tall tree in the tundra. Only short grasses, bushes, shrubs. Uh, but on the other hand, there is a rather big diversity of animal life forms. You see in the right lower right corner, you see a tundra fox, and we are used to the appearance of a fox who is has a peculiar orange to red color, but in the tundra, because most part of the year, the entire surface of the land is covered with snow. Uh, Foxes adapted to it. They aren't visible very well on white, right? And so they escape predators like wolves. There are wolves in the tundra, or there are some bears in the tundra, and foxes are their prey. So foxes have adapted to the to be being invisible on the background of white snow. By the way, let me just quickly ask you if you recall Darwinian mechanism of evolution. So how does it mean that each individual fox tried very hard to become white, exercised so that it lost its natural red color and acquired a white color? No, right? That's not how Darwin envisioned evolution. Darwin would probably say that, okay, in the say some millions of years ago, the tundra was not. It didn't look exactly like it looks today because the climate on Earth was different and tundra was not as cold. There were big patches of land that were not covered by snow, even maybe in winter. So foxes basically were red-colored or gray-colored, but not white. But a few of them were white. Why, we don't know. Well, Darwin did not know. We do. We know that it's a result of mutation. So regardless of the environment, simply because genes mutate, right? Some foxes were mutants and they were white. That was the kind of mutation. Then the climate began to change, and more and more area was covered with snow, right? So the foxes that were white mutants and their progeny, because mutations, most mutations, there are somatic mutations that are not inherited, but most mutations are heritable. And so the white mutants and their children and their grandchildren received a selective advantage. They were not an easy prey to predators, right? So because of that, on average, they lived longer than red or gray colored foxes, and they had more progeny of their own. So within many generations, the populations of these foxes evolved, and they became all white instead of red or gray. Uh, Now, the tundra is a large biome. It covers about 1/5 of the Earth's surface, pretty large. On geographical maps, usually tundra is uh, shown as a narrow strip of land, but it's narrow because it seems narrow because to the north of it there's an ocean. The northern hemisphere, it's the Arctic Ocean, huge. And to the south of it there is taiga. Taiga is the largest uh, terrestrial biome. So it dwarfs the tundra, the image of the tundra on the map. But actually, tundra is also quite big. And the word comes from the Finnish word tunturi, which means treeless plains, plain without trees. Uh, doesn't really reflect uh, all the features of this biome. Uh, then to the south of the tundra, uh, dark red colored area on the map, the taiga. Taiga is uh, a coniferous forest or boreal forest. So it consists mostly of gymnosperms, right? Fir trees, pines, spruces, etc. Uh, Larches. Uh, it is huge. It is the largest biome apart from the oceans. It's only oceans are a bigger biome. Uh, the biodiversity in the taiga is very big, and there are very many species of both plants and animals. You see one typical representative of the taiga animals in the middle. Uh, uh, there, the one thing about taiga, in the tundra there is less snow in summer, but that's about it. The difference between the warm season and the cold season is negligible, very little. In the taiga, it's not like that. There is a very pronounced difference between the warm season and the cold season. In summer, in the taiga forest, the temperatures may be in uh, 70s, even 80s, and so quite warm. And in winter, winter is very long and extremely cold, like in the tundra. Rich precipitation, lots of snow. So again, that's difference from from tundra. Tundra does not have much snowfall. It's relatively dry, right? And taiga is wetter, it has more precipitation. Then temperate biomes, temperate deciduous forests and grasslands. That's our case, right? We are living in the deciduous forest, actually. Deciduous forest is the forest where the leaves change between warm part of the year and cold part of the year. They change their color and they become less attached to the branches and fall down. And so this falling down of leaves in Latin, this falling down is decidua. So deciduous forests are forests where the leaves fall in autumn and fall. Uh, Mild summers, uh, average about 70 Fahrenheit. That's not our case, definitely, right? So we are in an unusually warm part of the deciduous forest. Winter temperature often below freezing. So just like in the taiga, there is quite a difference between the warm part of the year and the cold part of the year. Uh, Trees and plants of the deciduous forest have special adaptations to survive in this biome. Uh, Leaves are kind of, to have leaves is uh, it's an advantage and also a challenge and even a burden in a way. For a tree to have leaves, leaves must be fed. And so when the water has a nice temperate temperature and the soil is relatively warm and there is like this uh, well-working system of transport in the xylem phloem of the trees, then the leaves should be kept. It's advantageous to keep the leaves, right, because they perform photosynthesis. Most photosynthesis is in the leaf, not in the trunk of the tree or in the branches, but in the leaves. Uh, but when the temperature falls down, the water becomes cold, the soil becomes cold, the transport of the xylem and phloem is not working so well. So leaves become a burden, and it's advantageous for for a tree in the deciduous forest to lose them for some time, for maybe 2 or 3 months, and then new leaves appear from buds, and that's like a new life for a tree. Uh, Uh, okay, one interesting thing about our area. If you drive in Mississippi, on Mississippi highways, obviously there's a lot of coniferous trees, right? Especially pines. They're so abundant here. So people might say that we are actually living in the boreal forest or in the taiga, but that's not the case. See, we are, albeit somewhat unusual in terms of temperature, warm part of the deciduous forest, but we are still in the deciduous forest biome, not in the coniferous or boreal forest. Uh, the reason why there are so many uh, pine trees and other conifers, gymnosperms, is that forest fires occur, uh, have been occurring a lot in the past and are still happening now. And uh, for a deciduous forest to renew, to grow from nothing, from burned area, it takes a lot of time and resources. For gymnosperms, it's less time and less resources. So because of forest fires, we can get a false impression that we are in the uh, coniferous forests, while actually we are in the deciduous forest. And grasslands, um, grasslands. There, there is no line drawn between deciduous forest and grassland. Deciduous forests may be to the north of grasslands or to the south of grasslands. But grasslands have their own peculiar features. No trees or almost no trees, right? But extremely rich uh, herbal carpet, prairies, grasses grow tall, and there are enormous areas of land covered with all kinds of grasses. Um, Quite biodiversity in terms of animals also. Who is this person who is standing uh, in the picture? Temperate grasslands, you probably know. Is that a, no, it's not a chipmunk. No. Okay, you guys decide. Okay, then a peculiar smaller biome, chaparral. Chaparral is uh, it says here it's a part of each continent and consists of various types of terrain, including mountains and plains, often confused with the desert biome because they share many similarities, hot and dry. But chaparral receives more rainfall than desert, and it has a richer vegetation. Uh, Classical chaparral in our country, Southern California. If you drive around Los Angeles or from San Francisco to Los Angeles, the more south you go, the less trees you see, and you see a lot of shrubs and bushes, kind of short forms of plant life, and rather dry land. In Southern California, chaparral receives some rainfall, but it is limited to between, say, early to mid-January to mid-April or late April. May is already less wet, drier, and then June, July, August, September, October, and even November and parts of December are extremely dry. It doesn't rain at all. Like you can see no rain in 4.5, 5 months. Very dry climate, and even in the city of Los Angeles, I lived there for a year. You can see the results. You can see that in April and May, the grass is green. Then in June, it becomes partially yellow. In July, it's totally yellow and dry and mostly dead. So there's no rainfall, so grass cannot grow. There's some interesting biodiversity of animals in the chaparral. Mountain lions, cougars, right? They live there. Uh, Coyotes, some other interesting animals. Uh, okay, then going south from there, desert. About 1/5 of the Earth's surface. So deserts are as big as tundra and smaller than taiga and about the same size as temperate forests. Uh, Deserts occur where rainfall is less than 50 centimeters per year. To give you an idea, what this means. It means that there must be one rain per year. There can be one rain per 5 years in some extremely dry areas. So very little precipitation, almost no precipitation, very arid uh, places. Uh, Although actually there are ecologists classified desert into four uh, types. Some desert, most deserts are hot and dry, but there are also semi-arid deserts where it's just a little bit more rainfall than in a classical desert. Then there are coastal deserts. They are as hot and dry as hot and dry deserts, but uh, they are uh, neighboring the sea, so they are on the coast. They have some peculiar characteristics. And then there are cold deserts. See the picture on the right. What's that? That's uh, Antarctica. Right? Actually, the biggest desert on Earth is Antarctica. Usually, when people ask what's the biggest desert on Earth, they say Sahara, right, in Africa, northern Africa, which is correct if you only consider hot and dry deserts. But if you include cold deserts, then the answer is Antarctica. It's huge continent, and it's almost all of it except some coastal areas. The inner part of the Antarctica is totally desert. It receives very little precipitation, very arid, very dry, but very cold. Actually, the coldest place on Earth. Okay, uh, savanna. Savanna is an interesting uh, biome, a mixed woodland grassland ecosystem. So it's some kind of hybrid between a tropical forest, we'll talk about it later, and grassland. Uh, the trees are sufficiently widely spaced so that the canopy does not close. We'll see in the next slide, this next couple of slides, you'll see tropical rainforest where the canopy is absolutely complete. It means it's like the tops of the trees form some kind of a blanket over the forest area. It's not the case in savanna. The savannas are maybe not as rich in wildlife as uh, temperate forests or taiga, but it's just so happens that savanna preserves some really interesting forms of life which are hardly can be found in other places. For example, zebras. Right? Zebras are typical savanna dwellers. Uh, uh, some types of predatory animals like cheetah. Cheetahs are the fastest runners on Earth, and they really have quite a bit of space to run, right, in the savannah, as you see from the picture. Uh, Lions, of course. Lion is the king of the savannah. Do you see a tiger on this picture? No, right? Because tigers are principally uh, not adapted to savanna. They don't share. It's quite interesting. They don't share the same habitat with lions. Lions love grass and wide open spaces. The tigers love forest, really deep, thick forest. That's their natural habitat. Okay, and then finally, tropical rainforest. Hot and wet biome, no dry season. Right? Whenever you come to tropical rainforest, uh, there is some precipitation, at least a little bit of some drizzle, and the surface of the earth, the surface of the plants that form the lower layer of plants in the tropical rainforest, they're all wet. Uh, if you look at this map, where the tropical rainforests are, mostly near the equator, right, or some 10, 15 degrees of latitude north of or south of the equator. It's the place on our planet where the temperatures are very high throughout the year. There is no cold season at all, and where precipitation is pretty heavy pretty much all year. Uh, they have high levels of biodiversity. They are called world's largest pharmacy because very many medicinal plants grow in tropical rainforest. And tropical rainforest is an important producer of oxygen and consumer of carbon dioxide. So preserving tropical rainforest is a very important task of not only scientists, ecologists, but all, all conscientious citizens, because they fight the well, they consume carbon dioxide and they produce oxygen. So the greenhouse effect is less. And the greenhouse effect is when the carbon dioxide accumulates in the warm air, but tropical rainforests consume carbon dioxide. Right? Leaves of tropical vegetation have chloroplasts where the photosynthesis is happening, so they consume carbon dioxide and produce oxygen. Okay. Now, a little bit about interactions in ecosystems. We actually defined an ecosystem as a number of communities interacting not only at the level of different animals, different species of animals, but also at the level of abiotic factors. So in ecosystems, there is interaction with UV light, with salinity, extreme pH levels, exposure to air, interaction with extreme temperatures, currents, turbulence, pressure. That's mostly for aquatic, um, but also for terrestrial ecosystems. Sunlight or its lack of sunlight, that's also an important abiotic factor that influences on ecosystems. Right? And then there are peculiar forms of interaction at the level of biotic factors. And we will take a look at them in the next slide. Interactions between species in ecosystems. The ecologists classify all these interactions into 6 categories based on how beneficial or harmful is the result of these interactions on each of the 2 interacting species. Uh, number 1 interaction, it's called neutralism. You see, and this table takes a look at interaction between species X and species Y. So what's neutralism? It's when there is no effect on species X and no effect on species Y. So basically it's no interaction or interaction of the type how do you do, right? There's no effect, no influence. So it says here wolves and lichen. This is example. Neither species is affected by the presence of the other species. Then amensalism. It's a type of interaction where species X is not affected and species Y is harmed, suppressed. Right? Typical example is in microbial populations, the populations of the interaction of antibiotics with bacteria. Penicillin, for example. The penicillin, or if we take a look at the producer of penicillin, Penicillium notatum. Remember, it's a mold that produces penicillin. Put it in the culture of bacteria. Penicillium is not affected. Right? For the Penicillium notatum, it doesn't matter whether bacteria are in this petri dish or they aren't there. It doesn't matter. It's just the same thing. But for the bacteria, it matters. If there is no penicillium in the plate, then they thrive, and if you put this mold, then they die. And so that's ammensilism. Then commensalism, when species X benefits and species 1 is not affected. It gives this chart gives you an example of the interaction between tigers and golden jackals. Golden jackals are they're actually scavengers in a way. They feed on dead animals mostly. And so what happens in the areas where tigers still live? There aren't very many, by the way. Currently, tigers are endangered species. Most of them live in zoos. But if there are tigers in the wild, quite often it happens that golden jackals are just kind of sidetracking, or they are accompanying a tiger and just kind of waiting till the tiger dies, loses a fight with another tiger for a female, or is killed by a hunter and somehow not picked or something. And then they eat the corpse of this tiger. So the jackals benefit, and the tiger, as long as it lives, it's not affected. So that's commensalism. I can give you guys another from my field of expertise. I did research in microbiology and immunology, and I taught microbiology for many years. Your skin is basically microorganisms. Right? The ratio between bacteria on your skin and cells of your skin is 10 to 1. So a piece of your skin is 10 bacteria over 1 cell of yours. So the surface of the skin is a very, very rich area of abundance, thriving of different microorganisms, especially some bacteria. And there is a bacterium called Staphylococcus epidermidis. When you hear Staphylococcus, you always have negative associations, but actually some species, Staphylococcus is a genus, and there are different species within this genus, of which some are pathogenic, like Staphylococcus aureus is a disease-causing bacterium, really bad for it. But Staphylococcus epidermidis does not cause any symptoms. So you do not even know that it's there. You don't notice the presence of Staphylococcus epidermidis. But Staphylococcus epidermidis itself benefits greatly because, first of all, your skin is always a little bit salty because of the sweat, evaporating sweat. Even if you're not sweating, still there are some remnants of the sweat on the skin, so it makes it salty. And that's what Staphylococcus loves. It's a halophile. It replicates in high salt environment much better than in isotonic middle salt environment. and of course different nutrients from your skin. Also, Staphylococcus loves to eat it. So it benefits and you don't notice. That's commensalism. Competition. Competition is when both species that are interacting are negatively affected. See, lion and cheetah. This table gives you this example. Lion and cheetah. They are competing for the same food, basically, right? For example, there's a herd of antelopes, and there's a lion, and there's a cheetah, and they both begin to run, trying to catch an antelope and kill it and eat it, and they are on each other's way, right? If the lion is more successful, then the cheetah does not have enough food. If the cheetah is more successful, then the lion does not have enough food. So it's a competition is negative for both participants. Mutualism, the opposite from competition, is when both interacting species benefit. Uh, the table gives you an example: pollination between insects and flower. Typical mutualism. The flower benefits because this honeybee will disseminate its pollen, and the honeybee benefits because it sucks the nectar from the flower, and then it will convert it into honey. They use the honey to feed their queens, right? And of course, not much honey is going to just a few queens, so a lot of honey just remains in the area where the honeybees are kept, and it is used for food by humans. So in pollination, both species benefit. Another example you see in the lower left corner on this of this picture, there is a photograph of a crocodile and a bird, and I don't remember the name of the species of this bird, but the point is that they are in a mutualistic relationship, because the bird serves like a dentist or dental hygienist for this crocodile. It picks the remnants of food from between the crocodile's teeth, and thus preventing the infection, preventing toothache. You know, crocodiles also have bad teeth and toothache, not just us. So the crocodile benefits, obviously, and the bird also benefits because it has plenty of food to eat. So they don't. Uh, they're very familiar with each other. They would never harm each other. You know, the bird will not peck this crocodile till blood flows, and the crocodile will not swallow this bird, although the crocodile could do it in a flash, right? But it will not. It sort of knows that it's a dental cleaning procedure. So that's mutualism. Okay. Uh, then predation or parasitism. Predation, obviously, what predation is. It's when some uh, species is a predator, another species is a prey, as it's shown in the upper left corner. The female lion is hunting a zebra, and in just a moment it will jump on the back of the zebra and bite it on the neck and kill it. Lions have a way of killing even large animals instantaneously by biting them on the neck, or in the area where the jugular veins are. It's almost instantaneous death. Uh, and parasitism, it's less obvious, less picturesque, but they are fundamentally similar in that in both predation and parasitism, species X, the predator or the parasite, benefits. and species Y, the prey or the host of the parasite, is negatively affected. So for this zebra, obviously it will be killed, right? So it's negatively affected. But in the lower part of this picture, you also see a deer and a tick living on the skin of this deer. The tick carries bacteria which will breed on the skin and in the subdermal areas underneath the skin and in the blood vessels of the skin of this deer. So they will feed on this deer, they will benefit from this deer, and this deer eventually will die of the bacterial infections because the bacteria that the tick carries, for the tick they are not harmful, but for mammals like deer, for us humans, these bacteria may be deadly. They produce some toxins that may kill us. So that's predation and parasitism. Now, an interesting point. So, species in ecosystems compete, right? Some of them eat other species, and some of them are in mutualistic relationship, etc. So the species interact. But what about the energy? See, how does the energy flow in the ecosystem? What is the source of all energy on our planet? The sun, right? So in the right upper right corner, you see the sun at the bottom of this pyramid. It supplies an ecosystem with energy. And then it shows you uh, what amount of energy is available for different levels of feeding, different trophic layer levels of the ecosystem. The lowest level is producers, plants, right? So suppose that from the sun in a certain amount of time, in a certain geographical place, the plants in a given ecosystem received 1,000 uh, energy units. I don't know what these energy units are. It may be joules, it may be calories, kilocalories, but it doesn't matter. It's just our starting point. So we let's agree that we assume that the producers in this ecosystem will get 1,000 units of energy, whatever they are. Then this ecosystem also includes consumers, right? And the first consumers of plants are insects, grasshoppers, which crawl and hop in the grass. They also eat this grass. Right? Other insects eat the grass. So while the producers in the given population receive 1,000 units of energy, the insects receive 100. Right? Where is the rest of the energy? Where is 900 units of energy? Lost. Lost, simply lost in the form of mostly heat, because the sun conveys some energy to the plant, right? The sun is responsible for photosynthesis, basically. The photons of sunlight trigger the electrons in the electron transport chain during the production of ATP, and then this ATP is used for making food for the producers and for all consumers in the ecosystem. But the sun also simply warms up the grass. Right? Each blade of grass is warmed a little bit, and this warming, the energy that is responsible for this warming does not go into photosynthesis, does not go into production of glucose or other or starch or other carbohydrates, nutrients. No, it simply radiates from this blade of grass, so it's lost. Then, uh, going up this pyramid, songbirds eat insects, right? That's a sad law of life. Insects are there to be eaten by small birds, songbirds. And while plants got 1,000 units of energy, insects got only 100, and uh, surprise, surprise, songbirds got 10 units of energy, 10 energy units. You know, where are the rest again? Where are the 90 energy units from the eaten insects? They lost, again, lost in terms of heat, in the form of heat. Insect is uh, feeding on the plants, right? Getting some energy, getting some calories, building its body, growing up, getting strength, etc. But in the grass, there is some energy that is simply kind of radiating and is lost in terms of heat. The same thing on the upper level. So a songbird eats say a ladybird. The ladybird is warm. If it is in the sun, it may be quite hot actually. So part of the energy that it receives does not go into making food. It is simply lost. Uh, and at the top of this pyramid there are hawks, and while out of all the songbirds in the ecosystem that are eaten by hawks, while these songbirds carry 10 units of energy, a hawk or hawks, whatever it is, maybe one, maybe more, get 1 energy unit. So again, 9 out of 10 units are lost. So what does it tell you? It tells you that uh, ecosystems are not optimal in terms of usage of energy. The major part of energy is lost in ecosystems. If you look at the pyramid of energy in the square in the left part of the picture, it shows you percentage of energy available at each level. If the uh, grass gets 10,000 kilocalories, right? Uh, then the first order consumer grasshopper will get 1,000. Second level consumer frog, 100. Third level snake, 10. And uh, fourth level consumer, or number 5 in the pyramid total, will get 1 kilocalorie, right? So the efficiency of the system is actually what? 1 out of 10,000, it's 0.01%. Not very high. Not very high. So energy is uh, uh, not utilized in living uh, systems as nicely as it is utilized in machinery that is built by people and humans and optimized to work in energy saving regime. Uh, then another thing, biomass. It's the biomass is mass of living material in each organism multiplied by the total number of organisms in that trophic level, right? So, and here you see the same law of decreasing of the amount of biomass when we go from lower level of the uh, pyramid in ecosystem to a higher level. They, a certain number of, I don't know, acres of or hectares or whatever, certain square units in the area where the ecosystem is, has 1,000 kilograms of producer grass. Right? Then this is enough to sustain herbivores, grass-eating animals, which are in total 100 kilograms. Right? So 10% biomass compared to the grass. Then the amount of meat tissue of these herbivores that is necessary and sufficient to feed carnivores in this population is 10 kilograms. Right? So again, 100 kilograms biomass, 10 kilograms goes to feeding carnivores, and 90% is just lost. And finally, at the top, we see the what is that? It's a lion, right? Well, some really huge and strong predator which can feed on smaller animals. It gets 1 kilogram of the body mass, of the biomass. So both the energy and the biomass are lost as we proceed from lower levels of the ecosystem to the higher level. Your textbook has one interesting picture applied to an ecosystem which includes humans. It shows you that a certain biomass of producers, right? Corn. It's just corn here. It has this biomass has in itself 2 million calories of energy. It feeds a herd of cattle, right? And the out of these 20 million calories received by the corn, 20,000 calories are consumed by this herd, and this herd consists of 10 cattle, so probably 9 cows and 1 bull, right? Or maybe 8 cows and 2 bulls, or maybe 9, or maybe 10 cows. And this amount of the amount of energy in this herd, right? It's 2,000 per 1 beef, right? So it is enough to sustain one human. One human. Of course, this human can get some other food, but if just imaginary, if this person ate only beef, then the herd of beef, of cows and bulls, which numbers 10 animals, sustains one human. And the huge area of corn, it doesn't say here in your book what is the number of individual corn plants, but apparently the number is probably in hundreds of thousands or in millions. It again, indirectly, if we skip the first level consumers and just leave just the corn and the human. So these hundreds of thousands or millions of corn plants are actually enough and necessary and enough to sustain one human being. And so we are very picky in terms of to live, to exist. We need a huge abundance of lower level consumers and producers. There is a also, I don't have the slide, but in your textbook there is a picture showing the so-called human footprint. It's basically the uh, uh, amount of ground in units of area and the amount of producers and consumers that are needed to sustain one human being. And on average in the world, it is judged as near sustainable. So even an average human being already requires the amount of resources which are at the level of sustainability or slightly more, right? And then an average person living in Bangladesh consumes a lot less and needs a lot less resources. So the footprint of that individual is classified as sustainable, right? More than enough resources on the planet to sustain human beings in that area, given their lifestyle and culture of consumption and availability of food. But uh, there are several areas in the world, including the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, partially Great Britain, not all of it, and Scandinavian countries, especially Finland and Sweden, not as much Norway, Denmark, Finland, and Sweden, where the people consume already much more than the planet provides them. So the human life in those areas is, from the point of view of ecology, is unsustainable. It cannot last. It cannot last. So, it is artificially supported, but by the laws of pure strict science, it could not exist in this in these areas at the level of consumption that is there. Okay, and finally, the food webs. Communities are characterized by food chains. In a community, there are producers, there are first-order consumers, second-order consumers, etc. But in ecosystems, there are food webs rather than food chains. So the interactions are not strictly vertical; they're also horizontal, right? For example, you see the um, salt marsh plants that are consumed by insects. These insects are consumed by rats, but they are also consumed by frogs. Then the rats can be consumed by snakes, and the frogs can be consumed by snakes. And the frogs can also be consumed by cranes, and etc., etc. So the interactions are more complex. They're not as vertical, not as simply vertical as they are uh, in communities. In ecosystems, they are complex. So why study all that? Actually, all universities, colleges, in their biology courses, they make some emphasis on ecology, and we also have an ecology course, which is mandatory for our biology majors. The ecology gives you an idea about balanced ecosystems. Ecosystems where the interactions are such that the population in whole is not jeopardized. It doesn't shrink. You see, it remains at steady state or increases. And in balanced populations, the populations of predator and prey will be in balance, and other interactions will also be in balance, so there is no deficiency in one or species X and species Y for all the interaction. And importantly, a change or removal of one feature in the ecosystem may affect the entire system. To remove grass from an ecosystem, just burn it all or kill it with chemicals, the entire system is disbalanced, right? Jeopardized because the first order consumers have not enough to eat, second order consumers have not enough to eat, etc. And so the ecosystem is ruined by that, by just one stupid action of human being. Then two important points before we proceed to the next lectures. Balanced ecosystems have high levels of biodiversity. What's biodiversity? Again, we will talk in somewhat more detail in the next lecture. And probably the most important point in the entire series of ecology. Humans can and do disturb the balance of ecosystems. Our activities are harmful for life on Earth. See, we are traditionally, historically, humans were egotistic. They used nature for their needs, and they did not care about the needs of the nature. And that's why there are so many areas which look ugly. Formerly there was this beautiful forest there, and now there is nothing. The area is deforested. Or there is a lot of garbage. There are these dumps in the urban areas and also in the oceans. There are enormous dumps of plastic which do not biodegrade. It doesn't biodegrade in salty water. It is preserved, so it's accumulated, etc. And also because of this harmful activity of us humans, some species are endangered. Some species are already extinct. On our watch, we know that they are extinct because of our activities in observable time in history, not millions of years ago, but say 50, 60 years ago, right? And this is bad because, again, the biodiversity is a key to stability, to balance of ecosystems, to thriving of the life on Earth, providing more food, providing more other things, because animals like sheep, they can be used for making their hair is used for making clothes, and so the disappearance of species is really dangerous for the human race. It should not continue, it should be stopped. We need to develop awareness of what we do to the biosphere, right? And what we can do, we can do better to not disturb the balance of ecosystems. Okay, that's it for this lecture. So again, there will be a short and simple quiz, maybe not exactly on this lecture, but on this and the next lecture. And then that will be all. Please enroll, register for exam number 3 and for the final exam. They should be available for registration because they are published and they are both on the smart proctoring. So you should, some students have already registered. I'm pleased with that, but if you are not registered yet, please do so as soon as possible. Okay. Best wishes. See you soon.